Ladies, have you ever heard of functional medicine? Have you fallen victim to medical gaslighting without even knowing it? Are you ready to take control of your own health? Welcome to the Rebel Tribe, where we work every day to encourage and empower women to be more, do more, and see more. My guest today is Claudine François, and she is going to address all of those topics and many, many more. So, Claudine, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, let's get right into it because I'm sure the ladies are sitting there going, medical gaslighting, what's that? So, first of all, I would
Mm,
love to know what exactly is functional medicine. I've heard that term, but I've never really explored it.
yeah, it's a great question. And essentially, it is trying to get to the root cause of an issue and resolving that rather than resolving all the symptoms that pop up, right? Because traditional medicine, if you think about it, we have an issue, we go to the doctor, they give us a pill, usually. That's called what I call band-aiding, right? So they're covering up the symptom rather than figuring out why are you getting the symptom? A really good example of that is when I had chronic migraines. And it was off, like it was to the point where, my kids were little. I didn't see them all week because I was in corporate. And then I'd be home on a Saturday and I would have such a bad migraine. I couldn't have anyone touch me. You know how migraines are. Nobody can touch you. You don't want any light around you. And my kids didn't understand. They're trying to jump up all over me. And it was the point where I couldn't keep anything down, not even water. And so, of course, like a normal person, I go to the doctor. I'm like, what's wrong with me? How do I fix these migraines? And they say, here, take this pill. So I go home, I take the pill, I can't keep it down, right? I can't keep water down. How am I going to take a pill down? So I go back. This isn't working for me. I can't keep it down. And they're like, oh, here's an anti-nausea pill. Take this. Okay, I can't keep the anti-nausea pill down either. So they say, oh, we'll put it in the other end. And at that point, I was like, hey, how about we figure out why I'm having the migraines? Why are these migraines existing in the first place rather than us trying to just slap down the symptom, get to the root cause? So that's what functional medicine does, is it gets to the root of the issue so you don't have all these issues popping up. If you don't have one, or if you just band-aid it, other things are going to pop up, right?
That sounds amazing because I know, thankfully, I am pretty healthy, thankfully. But I know plenty of people that have like chronic issues, and it just seems that's exactly what happens. They go in, they get a pill to control their symptoms, and then they get another pill to control the side effects of that pill, and then another until finally they're taking a handful of pills every day, and they're not any better. They're not well. So how does functional medicine help with that? How can that help people that have these chronic health issues?
Yeah, I love this question because you know how traditional medicine, we're stuck in little, what's the word I'm looking for? Little categories. Like you have a heart doctor, you have a ear, nose, and throat doctor, you have a lung specialist, you have a gastro specialist. Like there's all these little specialties, right? But the thing is, and I like to talk about it as pieces of a puzzle, right? So our body has all of these pieces to it. And if you look at the whole picture, if you put the puzzle together, you can see the big picture of what's going on in the body. But usually most doctors are like, this is my piece of the puzzle. This is the only piece I'm looking at. I don't care about any of the other pieces. So they're just looking at that one part. Whereas in functional medicine, we do a holistic analysis of what's going on in the person. We do functional medicine testing, which is what I like to call pre-disease markers, which we can get into that if you want. But the pre-disease markers will tell us where are you headed and how do we reverse that before you get to the point where the doctor's going to diagnose you. So we're putting all the pieces together so that we can get the holistic picture of your health puzzle. And from that, we figure out, okay, well, how do we resolve the underlying cause, the underlying root cause versus just slapping down the symptoms, like I call whack-a-mole. The mole pops up, slap it down. Mole pops up, slap it down. Instead of figuring out where are all moles coming from, right?
So what you're telling me is diabetes runs in my family, and I watch myself pretty quickly just because of that. I watch very closely. But you could actually tell me ahead of time before I'm even pre-diabetic or diabetic. You could tell me if I'm heading down that path.
Yeah, that's a great example because, well, and first of all, let me say a diagnosis doesn't have to be a sentence, a death sentence or a sentence, right? Because one, before you even get to the diagnosis, 70% of whether or not we get something is lifestyle, 30% is genetic. So although I don't really like using this analogy, I think most people understand it that your genetics load the gun and your lifestyle pulls the trigger. So you can decide, right? Um, but in to answer your exact question, so like if you look at a lab report, doctors run blood labs all the time, right? Most of us have had blood labs done at one point or another. And they have, if you look at them, they have these huge ranges on them. And the doctors will say, oh, you're within range, you're good. Well, one thing, what is that range? That range is not the ideal range. The range is not, oh, this is where you're going to feel amazing. This range is the average of all the people who've taken that test. So the average of all the people taking the test isn't going to do you a lot of good if you want to feel better. So the doctor says, okay, you're either within this range, you're everything's fine, or you're out of range and you've got a diagnosis. Whereas in functional medicine, we're looking at where do you want to be? It's a much smaller range. And if you're outside of that range, that's when we look at, okay, those are the pre-disease markers between where you want to be and where the doctor gets to the diagnosable part. Those are the pre-disease markers that tell us, okay, we're heading down this road. What can we do to reverse the symptoms and help you feel better so that you don't get to the state of a diagnosis?
That makes total sense because I am actually kind of living that. I'm the only one in my family right now who is not currently on blood pressure medication, which also runs in my family because as soon as I saw it starting to inch up, I started making changes to make sure because I don't do pills. I don't do
Mm,
pills. So I started
that's
making
great.
those changes and so far it's been working. It's on the high normal side, so I know I have to watch. But so far I've been able to keep it down so that I don't have to take medication. So yes, I'm right there with you. Awesome. And
Mm.
then when you're doing all these things, how does it, I'm trying to think the question I want to ask here because it's so important. How do you work all this into your lifestyle and your, and especially when most of us are busy, we have families and children and some of us have businesses or we work. How hard is it to work all of this into your lifestyle, your day-to-day life?
That's a great question. And I will say it depends partially on what the person's already used to doing, right? It also depends on the severity. So, for example, I have one client who has pushed herself to the brink, right? She was getting all of these symptoms popping up. She was getting all these diagnoses, and she just kept pushing herself. A lot of us are high achieving women, right? Like, we don't have time to be sick. We don't have time to listen to our bodies half the time. So we just push, 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 doing all the things for all the people until our body finally says, actually, you're done. I'm taking over. You need to be done. So she got to the point where her body literally wouldn't, she couldn't get up in the morning. She was so tired all the time. I mean, and she's not a high powered job that requires a lot of mental thought, a lot of physical energy. So it got to the point where she was in what we call the exhaustive phase, which means her body had been in chronic stress for so long that it started shutting down. Because that's what the stress response does, right? It takes all of the energy from your body to pump out this cortisol all the time. But at some point, it's kind of like, you know, you're a jockey on a horse. You can whip the horse long, for a long time, but eventually the horse is just done. And that's where her body got to. So she has to spend a lot of time in what a lot of people call self-care, right? She has to spend a ton of time supporting her body in ways that it hasn't been supported before so that it can heal. So it's not in that fight or flight anymore. And I think to answer your question more broadly, the things that we look at are more holistic, right? So a doctor may just say, you know, if you have high blood pressure, oh, eat less meat, eat lower fat foods, take out the sodium. But we have a very strategic, it's a five, I'll call it a five-pronged strategy, and it's an acronym, and that's the reason why I hold up my hands like this, because it's DRESS. D is in David, RESS. So dress your health for success, and it stands for diet. So what are you eating that is specific to you, right? Because I can see in your markers what you need. Rest, how much rest are you getting so that your body can get out of fight or flight and go into that rest and repair state so it can do what I call the maintenance cycle every night. Exercise, not too much, not too little. Because some of the women I work with are exercising themselves to death, right? They're trying to do all the HIIT workouts because they're starting to gain weight and they don't understand why. And, they're pushing their bodies too hard. Stress reduction, which is huge. And that could be mental, emotional stress. It could also be what I call internal stress or biochemical stress, where you have things happening in your body, whether it's hormone imbalance or gut dysbiosis, or all different kinds of things that could be stressing your body out from the inside. And the very last one is supplementation. So we use targeted supplementation. It's herbal based to help really kind of jumpstart your body's healing process, right? To give it the things it was missing so it can get back on track.
So it sounds achievable, actually. It doesn't sound that hard at all. In fact, it sounds a lot easier than some of the other things I've been told. So, hey,
Mm, mm.
if you really want to get your health together, ladies, check it out. I am glad that you talked about listening to your body, because I'm a big believer in that. I know when I'm not feeling well. I know when I haven't been doing the things that I should be doing. My body's very quick to tell me. Um, but a lot of women don't understand how to do that, or don't know how to do that. I'm not sure why we haven't been taught. I don't know. And that leads us into that wonderful term we talked about in the beginning. What is medical gaslighting? I know they're all waiting to hear this. What is, because we've heard gaslighting forever now. What is medical gaslighting?
Yes. And I don't know if I'm going to give you the Webster's official definition. I'm going to tell you what it means to me. And that is essentially when you're being told by someone in the medical community that what you're feeling and what you're experiencing isn't what you're feeling and what you're experiencing. And I have so many clients who have come to me and they said, my doctor says all my labs are normal, but I know there's something wrong. I know. I had one client, she spent thousands of dollars on all these tests that her doctor wanted her to do. And he kept saying, everything's fine, you're within range. And she ended up having two surgeries. She's about to have a third because they could not figure out. They're like, oh, you have endometriosis. Oh, you have cancer. Oh, we've got to go and take all these things out. And I found out she didn't have any of those things. She'd gone through needless surgeries. And of course, each surgery takes a long time to heal from. And still, they had not resolved her underlying issues. And she kept telling them, I know something's wrong. And they kept saying, well, everything's fine, but I guess we could do the surgery. So that's what medical gaslighting is when you know something's wrong, you're being told it's not, and you just cannot seem to get anyone to listen to you. I think a lot of the women out there probably have this experience when doctors just aren't listening.
I have told you some of my horror stories, so yes, and yes, I myself have experienced that. When I was given a pill, I hurt my back. I was given some basically narcotics. I said, I'm not taking these. And I had to argue with him to get I just needed a little bit of physical therapy, which I finally argued him into. But in order to do that, it was an accident. So he actually put in my medical records that, of course, were involved in the insurance claim, that I was argumentative, uncooperative, and refused treatment. And I'm like, that's fabulous, because here I am suing this guy for all my medical bills. And I was kind of skeptical about how that would fly. Were they going to look at that and go, okay, you refused treatment and you're charging us more? But actually, the therapy was actually less in the long run. So I don't know. But yes, I have been there. How do we how do we protect ourselves from these doctors? I mean, how do we keep them from doing things like that? I did not know about it until I actually got the copy of my medical records to send to the insurance company and the lawyers. So I would never have known that was in there for every other doctor possibly to see for the rest of my life. How do we protect ourselves from that?
Yeah, well, first of all, how dare you stand up for yourself?
I know.
Who
It's
do you
just
think you
horrible.
are?
We
And I
are the
think
rebel
that's what,
tribe.
well, and I think that's what a lot of women feel is that, well, this person went to medical school, he or she should know. Who am I? So that we start to doubt ourselves. And that's the thing I want to say to any woman out there who has either dealt with this or who's dealing with it now is that you do know. You know your body better than anybody else. They can run all the tests they want, Remember, they're looking at huge ranges, right? And there's clues within those huge ranges that are quote unquote normal, but they are not experiencing what you are experiencing. And they're not really taught well, they aren't taught to deal with pre-disease markers. They aren't taught to help you get better before you're really, really sick. Their expertise, and I don't want to be, bagging on the medical community ad nauseum because they are really good when it's a serious, like if you break your arm, please go to the hospital. If you have a life-threatening disease and it has gotten to the point where there's nothing for it, but let's use cancer as an example. There's nothing for it but to take it out. Please get that done. But there are things that we can do ahead of that point to help reverse it. So number one is listen to your body. And I know you mentioned this earlier. You mentioned some women don't listen to their body. I was one of those women. I did not, and some of us are stressed to the point where we don't even feel things anymore. And this is called a calcium shell. There's a physical marker you can get on a hair tissue mineral analysis where it tells you when your body is stressed out, you've created this calcium shell, which means your body is pulling calcium out of the bones, which is where we want it, and sticking it in your soft tissue. So we see it in the hair, but some people recognize it as joint pain. Some people see it as gallstones or kidney stones. Some people get high blood pressure because it's that calcification of the arteries. Basically, your calcium is ending up in places we don't want it to end up. And it has a numbing effect. It's a protective mechanism for trauma or chronic stress. When there's so much going on, we cannot deal with it. We stop feeling. So for years, when I was in corporate and I was under that chronic stress, I literally stopped feeling. I had a coach tell me, "You're just all neck up. You're not feeling anything," because feeling would be too hard, right? For her, women who are constantly in that fight or flight, women are too hard. But when you have these symptoms popping up and someone is telling you they're nothing, think twice. Get a second opinion. Get 100 second opinions, right? Because someone out there will take you seriously. You aren't making this up. This is not in your head. If your body is giving you clues, then you need to listen. So, as I said earlier, even if you get to the point where you are diagnosed, a diagnosis is not a sentence. There are plenty of diagnoses. Autoimmune is a huge one, right? You think rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, ulcerative colitis, Hashimoto's. I mean, there are a bunch of them where you can live a symptom-free life if you take certain steps. So, listening to your body, getting the right help, even doing some digging yourself, doing the research because the answers are out there. It just may take you a while to find them if it's a medical community, if the traditional medical community isn't listening.
And I'm right here to back you up on that with the doctors. I am a cancer survivor, and yes, the doctors were fabulous. And I would never say if you're having cancer symptoms, by all means, you need to go. But like you said, I just needed some physical therapy. I did not need pills that were going to make me sleepy and numb me up from, I did not. So there is the difference. I know all of you think that I'm anti-medical. I'm not. Okay. I don't think Claudine is either. We just think that we need to stand up and take control of our own health. And how can we do that though in this, especially in this community or this society now? It just seems like there's so much against women who stand up for themselves, especially when it comes to their health. How do we do that?
Yeah, unfortunately, women who stand up for themselves in any way can tend to get backlash. But I think the more of us who do it, the better it will be in the long run. And especially the more of us who end up in these roles and these positions, right? So I had one of my clients, she would take her husband with her or a friend with her because sometimes it's just easier when you have someone backing you up, someone who isn't as emotionally involved, who can help stand up for you or who could just be that support for you while you're there. So that's really important. Coming in armed with knowledge. Now, yes, Dr. Google doesn't always give us the right information. You have to be careful who your source is, right? So checking your sources. I mean, there's PubMed.gov, which is a great source that is all of the research that's out there. I of course am going to be biased and say that I when I do a search, I'm always putting functional medicine in the search bar because I know people who are writing from that perspective are going to be looking at the body in a holistic manner, who are going to be looking into the root cause versus just, oh, you take this pill for this issue, right? So doing some of your research, bringing somebody with you, and really trusting that you know what's going on in your body. That I think is the most important thing because until we trust ourselves, no one else is going to trust us.
And it's not just women. So, ladies, I'm going to tell you right now because, as most of you know, my husband has health issues, and I'm here to tell you that I am there at every appointment because I am the medical researcher in the family, and I am right there beside him to go, wait a minute, explain why you're doing this because it doesn't make sense to me. And I
Mm.
will give it I will give them credit. Most of his doctors have been very cooperative in explaining things to me, and they don't look at me like, "Why are you here?" So,
Yeah, everyone needs an advocate. Everyone does. And, even if you have a friend who does functional medicine, it doesn't have to be someone you're working with. If I have a friend recently who reached out to me and she said, I've had all these GI issues. And I said, well, have you run a GI map? Have you done a food sensitivity panel? I'm asking her and she's like, no, I didn't know I needed those things. So talking to somebody else who has a little bit of knowledge can also help to help you ask the right questions to your doctor.
okay, so I'm going to ask you a very personal question because this is my one big health complaint. I'm pretty healthy. I mean, I try my best. I eat right and do all the stuff. I try to do, all the things I'm supposed to be doing. And yet there are days when I'm still just so tired. And I know a lot of it's got to do with sleep, because I have new baby puppies who make me get up at 4 in the morning. They're sitting down here at my feet. That's why I'm laying down. They make me get up at 4 in the morning to take them outside. What can I do to get a little more energy during the day without popping down energy drinks and more pills? And do you have some tips?
Hmm. Yeah, so fatigue is one of those symptoms that can come from a variety of places. The question really would be, are you still fatigued when you get a good night's sleep?
Actually, no. Once I get a good night's sleep, I feel great. It's the sleep, and I know that eventually they're going to grow up and be able to get in and out. They're so small right now; they can't get in and out the pet door. I know eventually
Hmm.
they're going to get there. So I'm just looking for some things that I can do while they're growing, so that I don't die of exhaustion before then.
Yeah, I mean, sleep is so important. I don't know if you have an opportunity to take a nap in the afternoon, if you can just, even if it's 10, 20 minutes is actually a great amount of time just to close your eyes. You might not get into a deep sleep, but it will help you get that little burst of energy. For all my clients, we have a personalized multivitamin that they have. It's based on their test results, and those have a lot of them tend to have a lot of B vitamins in them. The B vitamins tend to give us energy. Another thing you can do is making sure, and I think you're already doing this, but eating as many whole foods as possible and reducing as many processed foods, sugars, sugary drinks, that kind of stuff. Because even though the sugary drinks and even the caffeine will give you that burst of energy, but then you have a crash. So, one thing I tell my dad, who has he's one of those guys who takes all the pills, right? The pill for the pill for the pill. And he refuses to do anything. Of course, why would he listen to his daughter? Yeah,
What do you
I
know?
told him, yeah, I'm like, Dad, if you do one thing, change your food orders. You eat your veggies first, then your protein, and then your carbs. Because what that does is that reduces your blood sugar spike. So if you think about like having a glass of orange juice, your blood sugar is going to go up and then it's going to crash. But if you have an orange, which has a lot more fiber in it, it's going to go up a little bit, but it's not going to have that huge spike and crash, right? So the same thing with when you're eating your meals, if you eat your veggies first and then your protein, it's basically creating this little fiber mesh in your stomach so that when the carbs do come down, it takes them longer to absorb. So you're not getting that huge spike. And that reduces your fatigue afterwards.
I did not know that. I eat the carbs first because I'm like the carb queen. Oh, I had no idea. That's
Yeah. And then
awesome.
always pairing your carbs with a protein or a fat would be good too.
Well, I do try to do that. I read that I should be having protein with, I've been tracking my macros, and apparently I do not eat enough protein. So I'm trying to up
Mm.
my protein intake.
Mhm.
But I love my pasta. I'm sorry. So
Yeah, I love pasta too, but I'll do a lentil-based pasta, which has protein in it. And then I'll add like roasted vegetables to it or some pine nuts or something like walnuts or something. And then you get a lot of variety.
I need to try that. I did try something new last night where I made meatballs with half ground meat and half chopped up portobello mushrooms, and I must say they
Mm,
were wonderful. They were wonderful. So, okay,
that's great.
that's awesome. This is all good stuff. Even for me who considers myself fairly knowledgeable in these things,
Mm.
and I'm learning stuff. So this is fabulous. So if you were going to tell the women that are listening the top thing that they need to do right now to take charge of their health, to align it with their lifestyle and their goals, and to get themselves on a path to well-being, lasting well-being. I mean, I'm at the age now where I'm looking at, I don't want to be a burden to my children as I get older. And I mean, I'm there, I'm 66. So I'm looking at like, okay, I don't want to be that person. How do we, what would be the one or two things that you would tell them all to do, like today? Go do this today or this week if you can't do it today.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say is a mindset shift of putting yourself first. Because so many of us women put our kids first, our spouse first, our work first. Like everybody else is in line on the list of our to-dos. And half the time we're not even on the list. And if we are on the list, we're at the very bottom. So putting yourself first is going to be the kind of the key to the whole thing. But the second thing I would say is what we talked about earlier, which is getting your sleep. Because if you don't get your sleep, the body's detox processes can't happen. So then you have like old toxins and old hormones running around in your body. If you're not getting enough sleep, you start to crave more carbs and sugar, right? Which we already talked about are going to make you more tired. You know, if you don't get enough sleep, basically a lot of the processes in your body, it can't function because sleep is our rest and repair state. It's kind of like if you never took your car in to get an oil change, how well would it run? Our nightly oil change is getting that 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night, quality sleep. Now, some people may say, I really wish I could sleep, but I have insomnia, and there are all kinds of reasons for that. So if you have insomnia, definitely want to speak to either a functional person or a sleep specialist as to why you either can't fall asleep or you're getting up. A lot of times it's either parasites or gut bugs because they party at night, or it could be a hormone imbalance. But making sure you're doing whatever you can, whether it's a like a detox bath before you go to bed, whether it's magnesium lotion to help you fall asleep, essential oils, like creating a bedtime routine that helps your body get into the relaxed state. Obviously, avoiding screens because the blue light from the screens stimulates our cortisol and keeps us awake. So, finding a way to get yourself in that relaxed state so that you can get a good night's sleep, so key.
I heard you mention earlier in the beginning of this conversation that you do testing. Can you talk a little bit about that in case someone wants to reach out to you and start working on their health
Yeah,
issues?
absolutely. So the first test I always run on people is called a hair tissue mineral analysis, or HTMA. And it's actually a hair sample. So we take about an inch and a half from the root so that we can see it's the best thing about it is that unlike a blood sample, which is just where's your body right now, an inch and a half of your hair is like 3 months of history, 3 months of data. And what that tells us is where are your minerals, your calcium, your magnesium, your sodium, potassium, and about 80 others. Those are the four most important. And if they are out of whack, if you don't have enough sodium, potassium, you're not getting nutrients in the cells, you're probably feeling tired. If you have a calcium shell, like I mentioned, you could have all kinds of other health issues. So we get that done first so we can rebalance one's minerals, which there are over 500 different enzymatic reactions that require certain minerals and for them to be in balance. So we do that one first. And that is the one where when we get those test results, we can create that personalized multivitamin so that people can get their minerals back on track. The second one I do is a stress and hormone panel. So how long have you been in chronic stress? Have you been in fight or flight? How has it affected your body? And where are your hormones? I'll have people who are estrogen dominant. I'll have people who have low estrogen and high progesterone. I'll have people with no testosterone. And by the way, for anyone who doesn't know this, both women and men have estrogen, progesterone, testosterone in varying amounts. So we all need them. We all need specific amounts of them. And when we don't have those, we can have all kinds of symptoms, right? So someone who's estrogen dominant would be really irritated all the time, would get more belly fat. Some of us as we get older, we start to notice that we have more to love around the middle. And that could be estrogen dominance. It could also be a liver imbalance because we're not getting old hormones out of the system or old toxins because the body likes to put toxins in a little fat bubble and keep them around our abdomen just to keep them safe from them. That's what we do the stress hormone panel to see where all of those things fit. And sometimes people will feel so much better once we evaluate and mitigate the hormone imbalances. But the last one, and there's a very specific reason I do this one last. The last one is the GI map. This is a gut health marker. And I get so excited when I get the results of this test because if you think about it, our whole gut system, it goes from our mouth to the very end, right? Like if you put that out, if you took all that and stretched out, it would crisscross a tennis court several times, right? Like we have a lot of energy going into what happens in our digestive system. And so when it's off, if we have food sensitivities, leaky gut, parasites, worms, bacterial imbalances, yeast, fungal, all these other infections, right? You have any of that going on, it is taking your body so much energy to deal with. If you think of like a road closure, right? Like let's say you want to go from point A to point B, but the road's closed. You have to take this whole circuitous route to get around it. That's what your body does when your gut isn't working. It has to spend all this energy going around it, not to mention the fact that you're probably not absorbing nutrients. Is another reason a lot of people have fatigue. You don't get the nutrients from all that great food you're eating. It's not going to do you much good. So I do this one last because I want people to be on that personalized multivitamin for at least 2 months to help shore up their body's vitality, to rebalance their minerals so their body can actually do all the processes we need it to do before we do the gut work. Because otherwise, the gut work can be really draining. Because as I mentioned, our gut takes a lot of our energy anyway. And so if you're trying to heal the gut, that takes even more energy. So that's why it's really important to have those minerals in balance first before we start the gut work.
This is all fascinating. I love that you're talking about gut health. Even the mainstream doctors are beginning to understand that the gut health is important. It's so important. I've read
Mm.
somewhere that most of your immune system is actually in your gut. So if it's messed up, that just opens the door to all kinds of things. I am so glad that you came and talked to us today because I've learned a few things. And like I said, I consider myself to be fairly knowledgeable, and I've learned a few things already that I'm going to be putting into practice. If I want to know more, or if anybody else wants to know more, where can we find you?
Well, you can always find me at my website, ingoodcleantaste.com, or at my social at ingoodcleantaste. But I also have a Radiant Living Facebook group. So anyone who wants to join that, I'm giving tips, I'm giving free Q&As, and even hot seat lab reviews. So they're more than welcome to join that, and I'll give you the link so you can put it in the notes.
Sweet, that would be awesome. I did join your group, so I'm looking forward to that.
I can't wait to see you in there. That's awesome.
So great. Yes, if you would send those to me, I will happily put them in the notes and the descriptions on the video and the audio. That would be fabulous. I know there's women out there that are just sitting here right now going, it's time. It's really time that I start taking care of myself. We can't. The thing that triggered me so much was two things: having to care for my dad as he got older, and the burden it put on me. I would not want to do that to my children. I will work to be as healthy as I can, as long as I can. But the other thing is, we're the caregivers, we're the nurturers of our families, and you can't give from an empty well. You can't squeeze water out of a dry sponge. So if you're not taking care of yourself, you have nothing left to give to everybody else, and that's just not good. So I know there's ladies out there that are going, it's time. So I am so glad that you came on and talked to us today. Claudine, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to pass all this information on to everyone, and hopefully some of these ladies are going to start taking charge of their health.
Oh, it was my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.